I need to check the list of used names before writing. The used names from the file are Maya, Derek, Cassandra, Owen, Natalie, Gerald, Priya, Diane, Serena, Constance, Lena, Ada, Theo, Vivienne, Claire, Rosalind, Felicity, Brandon, Hargrove, Leonard, Nora, Raymond, Marguerite, Bethany, Marcus, Petra, Iris, Elaine, Hazel, June, Harriet, Simone, Cora, Walter, Tessa, Gwen, Ruth, Dominic, Felicia, Zoe, Bex, Colin, Ren, Arthur, Lynette, Phoebe, Callie, Warren, Sloane, Edmund, Adrian, Vera, Portia, Broderick, Devereaux, Renata, Broderick, Devereaux, Renata, Griffin, Fig. I'll use fresh names not on this list. I never thought the worst day of my life would start with a casserole. My mother-in-law had been making peace for 3 weeks by then, dropping off food, texting me scripture verses, leaving voicemails that always ended with "I just want what's best for this family, sweetheart." And like an idiot, I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. When you've been fighting with your husband's family for 2 straight years, you get tired. You start to think maybe the war isn't worth it. Maybe if you just open the door, set the table, let her in, maybe it stops. So I opened the door. That was 6 months ago. I'm 31 now. I was 30 then, 8 weeks pregnant, and so exhausted from hiding it that I'd started sleeping with crackers on my nightstand so my husband wouldn't hear me throwing up at 3 a.m. His name is Elliot. He's good, mostly, but he has a mother, and that's the part that almost killed me. Literally. Let me go back to the beginning because if I start in the middle, none of it makes sense. Elliot and I met at a friend's wedding in Charleston, South Carolina. I was the maid of honor, he was a groomsman, and he spent the entire reception trying to convince me that sweet tea was objectively superior to iced coffee. He was wrong, but he was charming about it, and by the end of the night I'd given him my number. We dated for 2 years, got engaged, and got married in a small ceremony on his grandmother's property in Virginia. His grandmother, not his mother, was the one who handed us the key to the house we live in now. She'd owned it outright, paid off decades ago, and when she died 18 months into our marriage, she left it to Elliot. Just Elliot, not the family trust, not split between the siblings. Elliot, by name, in the will, along with a letter she'd written by hand that said she'd trusted him to take care of his wife and his future children the way she wished someone had taken care of her. His mother, Darlene, never forgave any of it. I want to be careful about how I describe Darlene, because I know how these things sound. I know that daughters-in-law have been calling their mothers-in-law monsters since the beginning of time. And half the time, the truth is just that 2 women don't get along. I've thought about that. I've turned it over 100 times, asked myself what I was doing wrong, what I could do differently, whether I was being too sensitive or too proud or too something. But here's what I keep coming back to. Darlene once told Elliot, in front of me, that his grandmother had lost her mind at the end, and that the will should be contested. She said this at Christmas dinner. While I was sitting right there, when Elliot said he didn't want to discuss it, she looked at me, not him, me, and said, "You got exactly what you wanted, didn't you?" It wasn't a question. That was the beginning. What followed were 2 years of small cruelties. Comments about the way I decorated the house, Grandma would have hated that. Questions about my job, is that really a stable industry, sweetheart? A running concern about whether I was healthy enough to have children, said with so much warmth, so much fake solicitude, that Elliot kept telling me she was just worried about us. She didn't mean anything by it. She meant everything by it. What I didn't know, what Elliot only told me later after everything fell apart, was that his grandmother's estate had a clause. A small one, easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. It said that if Elliot died without children, the property reverted to the family trust. Darlene was the trustee. She knew. She'd known since the will was read. Elliot hadn't told me, because his lawyer said it was irrelevant. He was young, healthy. They had plenty of time. He didn't want me to feel like a means to an end. I understand that now. I didn't then. So. 8 weeks pregnant. Exhausted. Darlene knocking on my door with a casserole and 3 weeks of manufactured kindness. I let her in. We sat at the kitchen table and she asked how I was feeling, and I don't know why I told her. Maybe it was hormones. Maybe it was loneliness? Elliot was traveling for work. My own family was across the country, and I'd been keeping the secret for 2 months by myself. Maybe I just needed someone to know. Whatever the reason, I told her. I said I was pregnant. I said I was 8 weeks along and terrified and excited, and I hadn't even told Elliot yet because I wanted to do it somewhere special. She set down her fork. She looked at me for a long moment. And then she smiled. Not her usual smile. Not the practiced warmth she always performed. A real one. The kind that scared me. That changes things, she said. I didn't know what she meant. I thought she meant it in a good way. I was wrong. The next morning I woke up with my stomach on fire. Not nausea, I knew what that felt like by then. This was different. Sharp, cramping, radiating up through my back. I lay on the bathroom floor for 20 minutes telling myself it was normal. That first trimester cramps were normal. That everything was fine. By noon, I couldn't stand up straight. By 2 o'clock, I called my OB and she told me to go to the emergency room. I drove myself. Elliot was 4 states away and I didn't want to scare him until I knew what was happening. At the hospital, they ran blood work, did an ultrasound, asked me what I'd eaten in the last 24 hours. I told them about the casserole. The ER doctor, a woman, maybe 40, with the kind of voice that stays level even when the news isn't, said they were going to run a few extra panels. She didn't tell me why. She just said it with a stillness that made my hands go cold. I asked her directly. I said, "Is my baby okay?" She said, "We're going to take good care of you. Both of you." Both. That word. I held on to it like a rope. The extra panels came back 3 hours later. There was something in the food, not a massive dose, not enough to be immediately obvious, but enough, a compound that in early pregnancy can cause cramping, threaten miscarriage, dangerous enough that they wanted to keep me overnight for monitoring. The doctor explained it carefully, slowly, like she was choosing every word. She said they would need to report it. She said I might want to call someone I trusted. I called Elliot. He was on a plane home within the hour. I remember the sound of his voice on the phone, the way he said my name, just my name, nothing else, while I could hear him moving through what I imagined was a hotel lobby, grabbing his bag, telling someone he had to go. I hadn't heard him sound like that before. Scared. Underneath all the calm he always performs, genuinely scared. He got to the hospital at 11 that night. He came through the door and I watched him look at me. The IV line, the monitors. The pallor I knew I had because I'd seen it in the dark reflection of the window. And he crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed and took my hand. And didn't say anything for a full minute. Then he said, "Tell me everything." So I told him. The casserole. The visit. The smile. That changes things. I told him about the will clause I'd only just found out about. I told him I was terrified and furious and I needed him to believe me. He believed me. I want to give him that. Because what came next was hard and he didn't handle all of it well. But in that moment, in that hospital room, when I told him I thought his mother had done something to the food, he didn't flinch. He didn't say, "Are you sure?" Or "That doesn't sound like her." He just nodded, once, slow, and said, "Okay, what do we do?" The police came the next morning. A detective named, I'll just call him the detective, because he matters less than what happened, came and took a statement. He was polite, professional. He wrote everything down. And then Darlene showed up. I don't know who called her. Maybe Elliot's sister, who I'll call my sister-in-law, because that's all she was to me by then. A title, not a person. She came through the door first, my sister-in-law, and she was already talking before she'd fully entered the room. Her voice was high and tight and she was holding a folder. I don't know what was in it. And she said something about how this was exactly what she'd been afraid of. How I had been manipulating this family from the beginning. How the pregnancy was probably not even real. I was in a hospital bed, with a fetal monitor running, with an IV in my arm. The detective looked at the monitor. He looked at me. He looked at my sister-in-law. And to his credit, the only credit I'll give him, he said, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to wait outside." But Darlene was already in the doorway. She looked perfectly composed. That was the thing about Darlene, she always looked composed. Soft cardigan, silver jewelry, The kind of woman who reminds you of a librarian or a church choir director. She looked at me with something that could have passed for concern if you didn't know her, and she said, "Sweetheart, I am so sorry you're going through this, but I think there's been a misunderstanding." Elliot stood up from his chair. I had never seen him stand like that. He's not a tall man, not imposing, but he stood up from that chair, and he looked at his mother, and he said, very quietly, "You need to leave." She blinked. "Elliot. Right now." He didn't raise his voice. "He didn't need to. You need to leave this room, and you need to call our family lawyer, and you need to not say another word to my wife." The detective stepped between them. My sister-in-law was still talking in the hallway. I could hear her, muffled, insistent, like a radio in another room. The fetal monitor beeped, steady and even and indifferent to all of it. My baby's heartbeat, right there in the room, obvious and undeniable. Darlene left. The results from the toxicology panel came back 2 days later, while I was still in the hospital. The compound they found, I won't name it because I genuinely don't want to give anyone ideas, is not something that ends up in a casserole by accident. It's not a cooking ingredient. It's not a supplement that could be confused with something else. The detective came back. This time he didn't write things down so much as he listened. Darlene's lawyer called Elliot that afternoon. The lawyer said Darlene was deeply distressed by the accusations and that any suggestion of wrongdoing was categorically false. The lawyer used the word categorically 3 times. I counted. Here is a part I haven't talked about publicly, the part that still makes my chest tight when I think about it. I had told Darlene I was pregnant before I told my own husband. She had been the first person to know. She had sat across from me at my kitchen table and heard the most vulnerable thing I had said out loud in months, and she had looked at me with that smile. That changes things. And she had gone home and done what she did. I think about that a lot, the specific betrayal of it. Not just that she hurt me, but how she hurt me, through the trust I'd extended her, through the door I'd opened because I was tired of fighting and lonely and wanted to believe that people could change. She used my hope against me. That's the part that took the longest to stop hurting. Elliot and I had a lot of conversations in those weeks, hard ones, about the will clause he'd kept from me. He understood why I was angry about that, and I'm not going to pretend I wasn't. About his mother, about what he'd ignored or minimized over the years because it was easier, because she was family, because he'd grown up in a house where her version of events was always the correct one, about what it meant to be married, really married, in a way that meant your first loyalty was to the person you chose, not the family you were born into. He didn't handle all of it perfectly. There was a night, maybe a week after I got home from the hospital, where he sat at the kitchen table and put his head in his hands and said, "She's still my mother." And I sat across from him and I said, "I know, and she still did what she did. Both of those things are true." He looked up at me. He nodded. That was the moment I knew we were going to be okay. The legal process was slow, the way legal processes always are. The toxicology report. The detective's investigation. Darlene's lawyer sending letters. Our lawyer responding. Elliot's sister calling me no fewer than 11 times over the course of 3 weeks. I know because I counted those 2, let them all go to voicemail, saved every single one. And some of them she cried, and some of them she threatened. In one of them she said things about me that I will never repeat because they don't deserve to be repeated. I saved that one too. What I want to tell you, what I think is important, what I wish someone had told me, is that being believed matters more than I can explain. Not legally, not officially, just personally. When Elliot stood up from that chair and told his mother to leave, that mattered. When the ER doctor looked me in the eye and said, "We're going to take good care of you, both of you," that mattered. When my own mother flew in from Portland without being asked, showed up at the door with 2 suitcases and a look on her face that said, "I dare anyone to try something," that mattered. You survive the bad things because of the people who stay. Darlene was formally charged 4 months after the incident. I'm not going to detail the charges because I was advised not to, and also because, honestly, seeing the charges spelled out in a legal document was anticlimactic in a way I didn't expect. What I expected was relief or satisfaction or something cathartic. What I actually felt was tired, just tired. What I can tell you is this. The estate clause, the one about Elliot dying without children, became relevant in a different way than Darlene had planned, because with the charges came a civil case, and with the civil case came discovery. And in discovery, our lawyer found a series of emails, Darlene to her own attorney, written over a period of 18 months, that documented, in her own words, her awareness of the clause, her concern about my pregnancy complicating her position, and her belief that the situation needed to be managed before it became permanent. Before it became permanent. She was talking about my baby. I read those emails once. I sat in our lawyer's office and I read them on a printed page, and I handed them back and I asked for a glass of water, and I sat very still for about 5 minutes while the room did something strange around me. Not spinning, more like receding, like I was watching it from a distance. And then I came back to myself and I said, okay, what do we do next? That's the other thing I've learned. The question, what do we do next, is the most powerful sentence in the English language. It's the opposite of paralysis. You ask it when everything else fails. You ask it when the floor drops out. You ask it and then you wait for an answer and then you take one step and then another. The civil case is ongoing. I'm not going to talk about what we're seeking, but I will say that the family trust, the one Darlene managed, the one that was supposed to benefit from Elliot's death, the one she had been protecting like it was her own, is now frozen pending the outcome. She has no access to it. Her lawyer filed 3 separate motions trying to change that. All 3 were denied. My baby is healthy. I want to say that clearly because I know when you've been reading something like this, you're waiting for that sentence. She is healthy. She's due in 2 months. We've already painted the nursery a soft yellow, not because we knew the gender, but because I've always loved yellow, and it seems like the right color for a room that's supposed to feel like safety. Elliot put up the crib himself. He watched 4 YouTube tutorials and it took him 3 hours and he got frustrated twice, and I sat on the floor of the nursery and watched him and thought, this is what I was protecting. Not the house, not the estate, not whatever is or isn't decided in a courtroom. This, him, on the floor with Allen wrench instructions, building something for our daughter. His mother is not welcome in our home. That decision was made, together, jointly, clearly. And it will not change. His sister is not welcome either. Not until she does something more than cry on my voicemail. That door is not permanently closed. But it is closed. Elliot's relationship with both of them is something he navigates on his own terms, and I've made peace with not controlling that. He calls his sister sometimes. He does not call his mother. That is his choice and I respect it. People ask me, when I tell this story, whether I'm angry. And the honest answer is, yes and no. Yes at what was done to me. Yes at the years of small cruelties I dismissed because I didn't want to see them clearly. Yes at myself, sometimes, for opening the door that day. But no, and this is the part that surprises people, no. At Darlene herself. Not anymore. I was for a long time. I was furious in a way that lived in my chest like something physical, something I carried. But fury is heavy, and I'm going to be someone's mother in 2 months, and I cannot afford to carry heavy things. What I feel now is something more like clarity. I see her clearly. I see what she did and why she did it, and I don't need to hate her for it. The legal system can do what it does. I'm busy building something she cannot touch. The house is ours. The yellow nursery is ours. The daughter who is kicking me as I type this, she is ours. Darlene wanted to manage the situation before it became permanent. It's permanent now. And if you are out there, if you have a mother-in-law who smiles at you the wrong way, who makes comments that could mean anything, who shows up with casseroles when she wants something, please hear me when I say this. Trust what you feel. Open the door if you choose to. But watch the smile, and save every voicemail. Because the truth has a way of becoming documentation. And documentation has a way of becoming the thing that saves you. There's something nobody tells you about surviving something like this. The hardest part isn't the hospital, and it isn't the courtroom, and it isn't even reading those emails in your lawyer's office while the room goes quiet and strange around you. The hardest part is what comes after, when the adrenaline is gone and you're just living your regular life again, making coffee, folding laundry, feeling your daughter kick, and you have to decide what kind of person this experience made you. I've thought about Darlene a lot, Not obsessively, not the way I used to in those first weeks when the anger was so physical it felt like a second heartbeat. But I think about the choice she made. Not once. Not impulsively, but over 18 months of deliberate planning. She sat across from me at that table and watched me trust her. And she had already decided. That's what I keep returning to. Not the act itself, but the planning. The patience of it. The way cruelty, when it's patient enough, starts to look like normalcy. What I understand now is that Darlene believed she was protecting something. The trust fund, her position, her idea of how the family was supposed to work. She'd built her entire identity around controlling those things. And when Elliot's grandmother left everything to him, something in her shifted. She didn't become a different person. She just stopped hiding the person she already was. That's the thing about people who operate through control. They're usually fine until they're not. Until something threatens the structure they've built their whole sense of self around. Then you see what was underneath all along. I'm not saying that to excuse her. I'm saying it because understanding why someone does a terrible thing is different from forgiving them for it. I don't need to forgive Darlene to understand her. And I don't need to hate her to protect myself and my daughter from ever being in a room with her again. What I keep coming back to, the thing I actually want to say if any of this helps anyone, is that the truth does not require your participation to be true. Darlene spent 18 months trying to construct a version of reality where she was reasonable and I was the problem. She wrote it in emails. She performed it in that hospital room. She sent her daughter in with a folder and a prepared speech. And none of it changed what the toxicology report said. None of it changed what the emails said when they were finally read by people whose job was to read them carefully. The truth just waited. That's all it did. It waited, and it held. Elliot and I had to rebuild some things between us, and that was its own kind of hard. The slow work of trust, the conversations we had at the kitchen table at midnight when the house was quiet and there was nothing left to do but be honest with each other. He had to look at the years he'd spent giving his mother the benefit of the doubt and ask himself what that had cost. I had to stop punishing him for it once he'd actually done that work. Neither of those things happened overnight. But they happened. And now we're here. Yellow nursery, assembled crib, 2 months to go. And I think about how different this could have looked. That's what I want you to take from this, if you take anything. Not that people are good or bad. Not that you should trust everyone or trust no one. Just this. What you build matters. Who you build it with matters. And when someone shows you, really shows you, that they are willing to destroy what you're building, believe them. Don't explain it away. Don't get tired and open the door because you want it to be over. Some doors you close and you leave them closed. And that is not bitterness. That is just wisdom. Hard-earned, late arriving, absolutely worth it.